Well, hello, Shoki in Singapore. It's morning in
Hello.
Singapore. How are you
Yes.
today?
Yeah, I'm good.
It's a sunny day in Singapore, I can say.
Yeah.
Um, Congratulations on your film, Adam. It is
Thank
quite
you.
touching and very beautifully made. Could
Thank you.
you tell us a little bit about the evolution of your film, how it came about, how you shot it, and so on?
The story was the process of a lot of development. Basically, so this script was sorry, the film. A little bit of background for the film is it was made as my thesis film at Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. So for me, I think the script writing has always been a big challenge, and this script was the third script that I wrote for my thesis film. So um, I guess the story kind of came about just exploring different ideas. For me, or in Singapore, one thing that I found quite interesting is that we always address race in a very binary fashion. So, in Singapore, it's quite common to say that there is a Chinese race, Malay race, Indian race, and then a classification, they usually just say others for the rest. So I thought it was quite interesting how things are quite binary in that sense. For me personally, my mom is from Japan, so she's Japanese. My dad is Chinese Singaporean. So I think growing up, I've always thought about this, and growing up, I've just kind of been classified as as a Chinese race, right? So it's quite binary, but I always had this kind of thought at the back of my head, like, how do you identify with these different categories? So yeah, so part of the film was about that, and then I explored the idea of a young boy. So I thought it'd be interesting because someone in that age of like 10 to 9 kind of has their own agency. They can be almost like an adult making their own decision, but at the same time they also rely on their parents and someone to guide them. So then this character who is kind of confused and trying to find his identity, I think, came out in the development, and that's how the story kind of came about. Yeah.
Just to clarify for people who might not see it, the founder is Chinese Singaporean, right? And the
Yes.
mother is Malay.
Yes, that's
And
right.
so he speaks Mandarin to his father and Malay to his mother, right? And
Yeah,
that's
that's right.
part of his conflict.
Mm.
The boy is very beautiful and very convincing in his role. How did you work with him? How I forgot his name. Could you remind us of his name?
The character's name is Adam.
No,
The
Adam,
actor's
but
name
the
is
actress, yeah,
Aiden. Yeah. So
Aiden.
yeah, the actor's name is Aiden.
So how did you work with him? How did you find him?
So we actually street casted. So I knew going into this that we didn't want to find a young actor who already had experience, especially if it's in television or commercials, because um, I think they might come with kind of their own idea of how to act. So with this, we wanted quite a honest performance, and so we ended up deciding to street cast. So basically, it was a process of just us going around literally the streets, and also because the character, as you mentioned, the mom is a Malay and the dad is Chinese. So in terms of the look, we have to find someone who was kind of racially ambiguous. So that was quite a challenge as well. So we decided to street cast. And in terms of working with him, we did a lot of rehearsals. So I think maybe 3 months or 2 months before the shoot, we were already working with him, kind of going through the scenes with him, and just in bite-sized pieces, trying to explain to him the character, and to get him involved in the character story. So that was our process. I think most of it, in the rehearsals, was us or myself trying to get to know him and to basically have him comfortable with him working with us. So slowly we introduced, the DOP, and the producers has always been working with him. So at the end of the whole process, he was quite comfortable working with us.
Um, has he seen the film after you've made it?
Yeah, he's seen the film.
What did he say? What does he think about it?
He's a child with few words. He doesn't express much like
Yeah.
the character in the film. So yeah, I mean, I think he's happy at the final product. His parents are very proud. I must say. And we are very proud of him as well.
That is good. There are quite a few films at PRINDIE, short films, I would say, that feature children in the past couple of
Okay.
years at least, which is, I mean, it is interesting to me, and I'm wondering what the appeal of writing stories and shooting stories about children of a particular age is. I would think that it's more complicated to work with children than with teenagers or let alone grown-ups. And so I don't think it's just the convenience of it, or just it's not the convenience of it. It will be more difficult. So it has to do some. My theory is, I wonder what you think about it, is that it has to do something with the future for the children. And this is across countries, across the globe, right? That filmmakers are thinking about the future into which these children will mature. And so that, in other words, it expresses filmmakers' concerns about the world as it is and as it is going to be. I wonder if you have any thoughts about that.
I think for me, having a character that's quite young, I think presents quite a good opportunity to have a character that has a sense of naivety, and also because it's a short film, so within that short period of time we can actually show quite a significant level of growth in the character. So I feel like that's quite an appeal, just because I think if it's an adult character, for instance, I think that character often comes with a lot of their own I guess their own baggage or their own kind of perspective of the world. With a child is much more interesting in terms of from the point of view of writing, because you can really show quite a pure kind of starting point for the character, and then eventually we see how the society or the world or the circumstances kind of affects them, and to inherently affect their purity, for example, or their naivety, for instance. So I think that has been the appeal for me. And also, I think writing for a younger character also presents the opportunity to kind of to dream a little bit more. I think as if you're writing a character for kind of adults, or I think in a certain way it is also a challenge, because then you have to consider kind of the journey of the character that he or she has been through in the past 20, 30, 40 years of their life. So that for me was, I guess, the appeal for this story. And also I think for this story it was quite apt to have a younger character. I thought it was quite interesting to explore this transitional period where he is a young boy, but also he's at certain scenes he suddenly becomes this kind of young adult. He's making his own decisions. So that for me was quite appropriate.
I think it's done very well with that. The boy has agency and so makes decisions. And there's a wonderful moment when he throws away the can with the baby food in kind of defiance, right? Because he's so sick of dealing with it and being punished for it and all this burden of the can of the baby food, and he hurls it over the railings. I also find very interesting and very beautifully done and very thoughtful is the way you treat space, the opening scenes and shots in these narrow spaces, crowded spaces, where he's kind of lost in the long hallways. And then the mother's apartment is entirely different. And then, walking on the street, there are quite a few shots with sort of long paths or narrow spaces leading into some kind of a future. Could you talk a little bit about the way you shot the space and thought about space and your character in space?
So for the space that we filmed in is actually the kind of, these are government apartments, and that specific design where we have this long corridor, and on both sides you see doors to different apartments. This design generally you'll see this design in kind of lower income rental flats, right? So that was very specific to the character that we were portraying. And when we're doing the recce for locations, I think that also inspired part of the story writing process. So with regards to the space, I think we do see a contrast between the kind of claustrophobic corridors and small apartment houses, and then also in some scenes you see the character, in more open areas. And one thing that was quite interesting that I discovered during the recce is that these apartments are quite small, unfortunately, and a lot of the families, sometimes they would actually have their furniture spill out into the corridors, which I found quite interesting. They would have kind of common seating areas outside. They would do their laundry outside along the corridor, which is also featured in a scene in the film. And the kids will generally want to be playing outdoors, so they'll be running along the corridors. They'll be outside with their friends. So that was quite interesting. And with regards to this story, Adam's character, he's kind of cooped up. He's kind of repressed at home, and he has to deal with his parents. So when he's outside, that's his play space, right? He feels safe. In the first scene, he actually keeps his toy in a table outside. So that kind of symbolizes that he feels much safer in that space. So that was our idea of how we try to explore different spaces. Also, there's a scene where he's kind of swinging out in the open, and that's the first time you ever see him kind of being free.
Yeah. In that particular scene, I was just going to mention that there's this wonderful shot when his mother is a kindergarten teacher, right? And so he watches her from the outside playing with other kids or teaching other kids. And then there's a reverse shot when the mother and Adam are outside, but the camera is inside in the kindergarten space. And so we can see them from afar, right, having a conversation. There's a line in between them, and they're having a conversation. But the camera is inside in the childhood space, as though to suggest that he is outside of the childhood space, that he has crossed into different age and different space. I found the way you dealt with space quite remarkable, which leads me to this question. As I mentioned in my email, I will show your film to my students and the script. And so I haven't read the script yet, but I want to ask you, to what extent were you thinking about the shots and the visual storytelling at the script level? And in general, how do you work on your script and develop your script? You said that you had a hard time working on a script or scripts, right? So how do you work on your script? How do you develop it? How do you get it to a version that is good enough for you to start working on shoot?
Yeah, so I find it hard to write dialogue. So, a lot of my scenes, I try to think of it from a visual point of view. So I think a lot of that, a lot of the cinematography or a lot of the mise-en-scène of the scene, I've kind of have an idea of it in my head. I always find it hard to imagine a location and try to write a scene in a location that I don't have an idea of the physical space. So I think that also helps in terms of trying to integrate. By having an idea of the space, I can integrate how the characters might move or how the scene might play out. So I think in the script writing stage, I actually have a lot of the ideas of how to shoot it in my head. It might not be fully articulated in the screenplay, but because we for that film in particular, I was working with my DOP, from the very early stages. So we had the opportunity to have conversations about this. Also, we would go on location recce's together. So then we would kind of explore opportunities, and while the script's being developed. So I think I was in that unique position of not having to be so specific in terms of writing out how it's being shot, and I usually try to avoid that. But I think I really had an idea of how the spaces would be, because I think a lot of the scenes are quite specific to the physicality of the spaces, right? I mean, the fact that he has to be able to walk from the corridor up a flight of stairs, for instance, or when he comes back, he passes by the place where he does his laundry. So these things, to our benefit, we were able to kind of integrate it into the script as we were developing the whole production.
I think it's brilliant. This is your thesis film, right? So you're a very young filmmaker, and it's been well received from what I know. It's been well noticed in Cannes, for instance, right? What has been the response wherever you've shown it, and what do you take from that response?
Yeah, so I think I didn't expect the film to get the response it got. For me, I think what was most surprising is I always thought it was quite a simple story, but I kind of along the way I didn't I kind of forgot all the little details that I put inside. So just when the film's done, I just thought, oh, it's quite. I mean, the general story arc is quite a simple one. There's no kind of fancy plot points or twists and turns. So yeah, I didn't think too much about it when we completed the film. So I was quite shocked at the response. And yeah, I think one thing that when after screenings, when people would talk about the film, they would usually tell me about how they felt that the film was dealt very sensitively, and I think that was because we kind of had the time to develop, and yeah, for me it was a lot about, I guess, the details in each scene, so trying to make it as real and as um, nuanced as possible.
I find it very mature. At the same time, it embraces the youth of your character, right? And so it has this wonder of the world and paying attention to details, as you were saying, but also it is mature. It is the child has complex emotions. Adam is his situation is very, very complicated. It did remind me to some extent, and I mean this entirely as a compliment, particularly the last scene when he runs, right, and the camera tracks him. It reminded me of the Truffaut film, the 400 Blows, the 400 Coups. I wonder if that film is important to you, and also in general, who are important filmmakers to you? Who do you like to watch? Who do you learn from? Who do you argue with in the among
Um,
filmmakers?
so that's quite interesting because I didn't watch. Sorry, the film you mentioned is 400 Blows, right?
The 400 Blows, yes.
Right. Yeah. So I was only made aware of the film when I was at a screening and someone mentioned that exactly what you said, and then I was thinking, oh, because for me I was inspired by Koreeda's Nobody Knows, and I think he was inspired by Truffaut's 400 Blows,
Yeah.
the final scene of that. So then there was this kind of interesting kind of tracing back of two different films. Yeah. So for me, I wasn't I hadn't explored Truffaut's film yet at that point. Yeah, I guess for me, in terms of filmmakers that I was influenced by, I was very fortunate to have a mentor to that exposed me to a lot of films. I think growing up I wasn't much of a cinephile, but it's still when I was in university and the final year project, my mentor actually brought me to the library and showed me all these amazing films. So one of them that really struck me was the films by the Dardenne brothers, and I think that the way they deal with their characters and also the kind of realism that they portray was quite inspiring for me. So I think so. This film was very much me trying to project a little bit of that in the way I wrote the script. Yeah.
It had like the Dardenne brothers films. It has a strong sense of presence in a particular society, a particular social context, and the sense that people live there, they live their lives. There's no, it's not, very not abstract, if I may um, say so. It is interesting that to see how, I mean, the scene from the Truffaut film is so iconic that it's been repeated a number of times, and it's because a lot of people find it found the film very, very important. It's very interesting to see how a couple of generations later it reaches a young
Mhm.
filmmaker like you. Of the contemporary cinema, like what do you think of, I guess, Hollywood cinema, sort of the big productions, expensive movies with CGI and special effects and franchises? A lot of my students, I have to say, they're far more likely to be exposed to that kind of cinema than to Dardenne brothers or let alone Francois Truffaut. So when you were growing up, what kind of movies were you watching before you reached your, professional level or professional education level?
Yeah, I growing up I wasn't too much of a cinephile, so I think we in our cinemas here in Singapore, it's we don't really have a lot of films that are not in the mainstream. So growing up, actually, I guess my cinema diet was mostly kind of Hollywood or mainstream films. But as I slowly got the opportunity to explore different films, then for me it was opening up this whole world, right? I think also having this exposure to all these different forms of cinema at quite a later stage of my life, I think that gave me this sense of awe and this excitement that there's so much more to explore. So I think for me it was like, for instance, when I watched the Darden film, right? I think the first film that I caught was Rosetta, and then after that I was just like, I have to rewatch all the films because it was so refreshing for me, and I found it you know I just it's as though the floodgates kind of opened for me.
So when did you know you wanted to be a filmmaker? If you were not a cinephile when you were young, when was it after watching the Dardenne brothers, or were you already developing your cinephilia?
So I was always interested in photography, and I was quite, I think, going into university, actually I thought I would be focusing more on the camera work and the technicalities of it, which I'm still quite interested. But I think the opportunity, when I was presented the opportunity to write my own scripts, and so I made a few short films prior to this thesis film as well, where I had the chance to write. I think that gave me that allowed me to express myself, and I found it quite rewarding and quite and the whole process was quite interesting for me. So then I slowly kind of practice my writing and explore different story ideas. So for me it was a process, and it very much started when I first had the opportunity to write a kind of proper short film. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about cinema film industry in Singapore? It is not well known, to me at least, or in this country. There are not that many movies that are available. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen a Singaporean film until I saw yours. And yours is so good that I think that, there might be more there. Can you tell us a little bit about cinema in Singapore?
Uh, yeah, so in Singapore, there are, of course, we have more mainstream films, but I think right now, or in the recent years, actually, I've been seeing a lot of independent movies. In fact, there was a film, Ilo Ilo, that won one of the top prizes in Cannes. I think it was the sorry, I can't remember the category right now off the top of my head, but yeah, I think I was quite inspired by us, and the filmmaker is Anthony Chen. So
Uh-huh.
also there was another film, Apprentice by Bu Jin Fong. So these films also that film also ended up at Cannes Film Festival. So I think right now we are seeing quite a number of filmmakers that are making independent films. With regards to in the past, I think in Singapore the industry started out with a lot of commercial films, as with a lot of industries, and there was a lot of influence from, for instance, like Hong Kong, and those action films. We do have quite a number of comedy films as well, but I think in the recent years there has been quite a few independent productions, and we are starting to see a lot of kind of young independent filmmakers coming together. So that's something that I've always been quite inspired by, and I think with what I'm seeing right now, I think it won't be long till I think we see a lot of Singaporean films being quite known to the world, especially in I guess the more festival or art house circuits. Yeah.
I mean, Asian cinema is amazing all across the board. Japanese, Chinese, Indian, and so I look forward to seeing your films. Which brings me to this question: what is your next project? How do you see yourself? What is it that you want to do next? Do you have something developing? What are you striving toward?
Yeah, so I'm always constantly kind of thinking potential story. Right now, I'm working on my next short film. It is still in development right now, but hopefully we're planning to shoot and quite soon. So hopefully that goes well. For me, I guess I guess I'm trying to figure out the career part of things, and also
Yeah.
being able to make and write these independent films. And I guess ultimately, the goal is to be able to make a feature film. But I'm still growing and discovering this whole process. So I can't say for sure what exactly I'll be doing.
But you will be making films for
Oh yeah,
sure.
for sure. Yeah.
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 Well, I'm going to look for them. Good
Thank
luck
you.
to you. I hope to see
Thank
your
you.
future films. I think you have a good future as a filmmaker. And I want to thank you for myself and also for all the Prindie audiences that who might see your film and enjoy. Shoki,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been nice speaking to you.